So thanks for Bruce for moving in there with the music, and I'm sorry I missed your joys and sorrows. So if you open up a search engine on your computer and you type in 10 COM, guess what pops up? Well, you're all muted, so I have no idea what you guessed, but the answer is 10 commandments. As I listened to a group of people react to these 10 commitments of humanism the other day, which were written and released recently, there was recognition and some pushback on the parallel language. While one of these lists gives behaviors that are said to be found by Moses and carved into 2 slabs of stone on Mount Sinai, the other list was created by the American Humanist Association Center for Education. The 10 commandments are to be followed if one is going to abide by God's commands, while the other is a human construct of commitments that one can choose to make or not. A few weeks ago, I spoke about Unitarian Universalist identity, UU identity, and the complexities of a faith that has statements that we affirm and promote, as well as a vast list of diverse sources for our faith. Humanism has some of the same issues as UUs. People are born or come into or discover humanism as varied as the ways that they come to identify as UUs. There are historic documents to look at, like the humanist manifestos. There are religious and philosophical leaders who identify and write about humanism. And there's a humanist association, the association that one can join and connect with. And there are UU congregations that began as humanist societies and continue with that focus and approach to their ritual and their language and their purpose today. First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis is a perfect example of a humanist congregation that was a leader in humanism in the 1950s and continues to be so today. It's where our founders came from, although now people in our congregation bring a variety of hyphenated UU identities, such as UU Christians or Buddhist, pagans, Wiccans, and of course, humanists. My colleague, Kendall Gibbons, who used to serve First Unitarian, writes, as a religious position and a spiritual path, humanism looks beyond the idea that a self-conscious personal God doesn't exist, which is atheism. It's more of an anti-theistic and anti-God kind of position. And she says, rather, humanism is founded on the more radical claim that the existence or non-existence of such a god or goddess or gods doesn't matter much. As its name implies, humanism is concerned with the world of human existence as it is known through human experience. The 10 commitments I'll speak of today helps move humanism from something sort of nebulous to a more rigorous way of life guided by values that are meant to be practiced. You'll notice similarities to our UU principles as I go down the list. If one lives with the commitments of humanism or lives by our UU principles or both as guides to being our best selves, then inevitably we as individuals, as members of society, as global citizens, and as stewards of the earth which we rely on, will be positive forces in the universe. The American Humanist Association, just like the Unitarian Universalist Association, created 2 versions of the 10 commitments, one for children and the other for the general population. And if you're anything like me, you might enjoy the shorter, clearer phrases that come under the heading for the kids, instead of the more dense paragraphs of explanation which accompanies the other version. So I'll read the words of the 10 commitments and then the one-liner that was created for kids. And after that, I've shortened some of the descriptions to provide a basic idea of each commitment. These aren't intended to be in any order of importance. The first is critical thinking. I will practice good judgment by asking questions and thinking for myself. Critical thinking forms the basis of scientific method. It requires a continued attention, practice, and reflection if we're truly going to challenge biases and rationalizations, conformity and stereotyping. So thinking critically allows us to make sense of information, and it paves the way for a fair and open-minded and autonomous perspective that fosters a multicultural worldview. The commitment of critical thinking. I will practice good judgment by asking questions and thinking for myself. The second is ethical development. I will always focus on becoming a better person. Imagine if we woke up every day and said that. The key to understanding ethical development is acknowledging that nobody is perfect or has all the answers. Each day carries with it new challenges and new moral dilemmas. Ethical development requires constant reflection and evaluation of our personal choices and of the consequences that it has on others. So this area of fairness and cooperation and sharing are among the first moral issues that we encounter in our ethical development as human beings. And this area, just as we should continuously adapt and rebuild our moral frameworks with the goal of becoming ever better human beings. If you think about Unitarian Universalists, how we say revelation is not sealed, we're always staying in the contemporary part of society and of our world. I think this idea of continually adapting and rebuilding our moral frameworks speaks to that. The commitment of ethical development. I will always focus on becoming a better person. Next is peace and social justice. I will help people solve problems and handle disagreements in ways that are fair for everyone. This area says that true peace involves an intense commitment to social justice, and it affirms the human rights and personal autonomy of all people. Sounds very much like our first principle. Any level of injustice against groups or individuals signifies existing conflict, even if the conflict isn't immediately obvious. We attain peace only by consistently responding to injustice through thoughtful conflict resolution that aims to repair harms and ensure a fair and equitable society moving forward. The commitment to peace and justice. I will help solve problems and handle disagreements in ways that are fair for everyone. Service and participation, an active way of being in the world. I will help my community in ways that let me get to know the people I am helping. This says that putting personal values into action to positively impact our communities and society as a whole fosters helping others and increasing social awareness and enhancing accountability. It's that relational piece. We know that when we serve, we don't just make others and organizations better, but we often grow and learn from the experience. We all have to recognize that we are members of a group, and engaging in service to benefit the group and other individuals in it makes us all better off. The commitment of service and participation. I will help in my community in ways that let me get to know the people I am helping. Next comes empathy. I will consider other people's thoughts and feelings and experiences. They say that empathy means entering imaginatively into others' situations in an attempt to understand their experiences as though we are experiencing it ourselves. It requires us to step out of our own perspective, to consider somebody else's from that other person's point of view. And it's not only critical to better understanding and relationships, but it also makes us better citizens in our local and our global communities. They say that empathy promotes tolerance and consideration and compassion. The commitment of empathy. I will consider other people's thoughts and feelings and experiences. Then comes humility. I will be aware of my strengths and weaknesses and appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of others. Humility, being humble, is described as being modest about oneself. It acknowledges that we humans are fallible and have limitations in what we know and what we can do. Humility involves setting aside personal pride and overcoming our egos to embrace gratitude for what we have and appreciate others for who they are. We're not better and we're not worse than anyone else. The commitment of humility. I will be aware of my strengths and weaknesses and appreciate the strengths and weaknesses of others. The next one, also very important in Unitarian Universalism, is environmentalism. I will take care of the earth and the life on it. Just as we depend on the planet to sustain us with its precious resources, the planet's ecosystems depend on us to be good stewards and to take responsibility for the impact of humankind. Humans have caused extensive harm to the Earth's ecosystems, it says. Despite this, we are also capable of positive environmental change that values the interdependence of all on this planet. Each of us must acknowledge our collective and individuals' mistakes. We must repair past damages and purposely work towards cultivating rich, diverse, and resilient ecosystems. The commitment of environmentalism. I will take care of the earth and the life on it. Next comes global awareness. The list is long and vast, as you can see. I will be a good neighbor to the people who share the earth with me and help make the world a better place for everyone. This commitment recognizes the diversity and interdependency of our global world. Global awareness broadens our knowledge of cultures and perspectives that are outside of our own experience. Attention to both current and historical events helps us understand how our social, political, and economic systems are interdependent as well. The end of global awareness is global citizenship, which recognizes our personal responsibility to foster a healthy and dignified life for everyone in our global community. The commitment of global awareness. I will be a good neighbor to the people who share the earth with me and help make the world a better place for everyone. Next is responsibility. I will be a good person, even when no one is looking. It always reminds me of that, would you do this if it was going to be splashed on the front page of a newspaper? Every day, each of us makes large and small choices, all have consequences for ourselves and the world around us. Moral responsibility involves taking conscious ownership of one's intentions and actions and being accountable for the resulting consequence. Being accountable involves steadfast attention to what is right and bearing the blame or praise for our own actions. The commitment of responsibility. I will be a good person even when no one is looking and own the consequences of my actions. And then finally, altruism. I will help others in need without hoping for reward. Altruism is this selfless concern for the welfare of other living beings without expectations of reward or recognition or return. Collective welfare depends on the welfare of each individual. We all do better when we all do better. We should seek to alleviate the suffering and the hardships of others with compassionate action by caring for others and contributing to the betterment of community, society, and the world. The commitment of altruism. I will help others in need without hoping for rewards. I think there's a lot of richness in these commitments. Similar to our UU principles, I think it's hard to argue against any of these. And if we choose to live by these commitments, I have no doubt that we would create and live in a better world than the one we live in today. I actually found some real strengths to these statements. There's things that we do not yet include in our principles, it feels like, with perhaps some of that emphasis to multiculturalism that we're looking at now. And yet, I identify as a religious humanist. So with that, or religious in front of humanist, for me, it means that I choose to practice these commitments and the 10 commitments and our 7 UU principles in a deliberate church community. And I recognize that people come to MSUS and some view it as a church community and others view it as a community, I believe, that holds them accountable and helps them grow. So personally, I use the language of reverence that speaks to a greater mystery, awe, hope, spirit of life, beauty, and then sadness, and I couple it with, or sacredness, and I couple it with language of lament and brokenness and injustice and forgiveness and healing. So those are words that I didn't really hear in the 10 commitments, but they're words that for me as a religious humanist helps feed my desire to participate in all these commitments. As you may have heard last week with Lisa, UUs are revisiting our principles at this time, and I am delighted that love is being named as the common theological core in Unitarian Universalism. They actually found in 2015 that when UUs were surveyed, that love came up more often than in any other faith community as a call of their faith. So it's kind of been around for a while, even before standing on the side of love became large, or now we call it side with love. So I wonder for you who are listening today and pondering your own philosophical or faith journey, I wonder as you hear these commitments, what calls you out as a particularly poignant way that you seek to live in the world? Do the commitments fit with your inner compass and help you articulate your life perspective or faith? Do you see humanism as a faith or as a philosophy? And if you see it as a philosophy, does being in a community like MSUS help you become a better person? And if so, how? Katie, I see, is putting some of those questions into the chat. And Katie, I'm going to depend on you to help run this period of time since I'm on my phone.
I am also putting in the chat, I think, a link to a poster that you might have seen on the welcome slides, although I'm not sure if they were scrolling through or if everybody saw them.
They'll also come out with the sermon, Katie, that link.
Okay, which is a nice, it is the brief version of what Reverend Laura was speaking about today.
It's a lovely colorful wheel. I will make sure to get a couple posters when we return to the building. I think it's a really nice reminder of this perspective of living.
So what do people have in response to hearing any of these today? Did any of them grab them as a way that they envision their own faith journey? I will look for hands or comments in the chat. I see Lynn Schumann.
I have to say that this has given me a much clearer idea of what humanism means. So thank you, Laura, for that. And also, I mean, it just fits so well with good guideposts to living, I guess I would say that way. I identify as a Christian, but there's nothing in that list of 10 commitments that I would disregard. In fact, I think they fit very well.
Mm-hmm. Lynn, I was going to say, you know, as Kendall sort of teases out the difference between atheism and humanism, and I think the part about atheism being sort of a stance of kind of anti-theism, where humanism is just sort of less concerned with the question. And I feel like, you know, people will hold both of those very differently, just how people hold Christianity or Judaism or any other type of faith. You know, there's the whole range of people who hold them in a more open-minded perspective or in a more rigid or judgmental or, you know, kind of extreme way. So I think I love these as well, because I think it helped bring it into a place that, just as we've had to do with Unitarian Universalism, like, what is the positive of it? What is it that we strive to be? Versus what are we striving not to be? So it's the answer of, you know, who we long to be.
And it looks like Marilyn has a comment.
Yes, this is Marilyn, and you know, as being a relatively new member of Unitarian Church, I have always looked to humanism and other philosophies throughout my life, but coming to this church, I found that it pulled everything I wanted to be into a more clear line. And then when you, as a reverend, called yourself a religious humanist and started to pull those threads out of what that means to you, I really connected to that those things are so important to me, that the greater mystery and awe and hope and sacredness and healing with others, learning to, one of our sermons a long time ago became one of my philosophies, ask the turtle, instead of me deciding for others, to listen to others as to what they need. So thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
And I do see a few things in the chat. Beth Strutman says, I can only say, wow, I'm hearing echoes of my upcoming story of becoming. Melissa says, now I have a better idea of what humanism is. It really resonates with me. And Amy and Chad say, I learned the term non-theism and I prefer that to atheism. I'm not anti-theism. I just don't find the question of theism that important personally.
Thank you. I think these are all for, working our way through, right? It's, and, I think I do appreciate the fact that there was this effort to take away how nebulous this is and try to create some sort of a common understanding.
I appreciate that it's a way to counter this idea like, oh, you can believe anything. Well, maybe I can believe almost anything, but I'm committed to, that doesn't mean I'm not committed to doing or living in a certain way. And I think that might help me kind of answer that kind of question if I encounter it. Kathy Burek, I see a hand raised, virtual hand.
Thank you. I used to tease Connie Metcalf, who are one of our staunchly secular humanist founders, that for me, a good ethical system needs to entertain the possibility of life on planets other than Earth. And with perseverance on the Martian surface, looking at the possibility that life once existed on Mars, it does raise the question of, as we go forward into these new environments, what is our ethical obligation to those places? Do we, are we careful about bringing germs there? Not because it would contaminate our research, but because it would be a wrong thing. And so it's kind of like the Star Trek directive about not doing any harm to the planets you visit. And from an indigenous perspective, the label humanism is troubling because it still centers the human species, as opposed to being a label that somehow or other really recognizes the profound interdependence, even just here on this planet.
Yep. Thank you, Kathy, for calling both of those out. Will we be people who recognize the damage we've already done to our own place and look at things ethically? I don't hold out a lot of hope, but it's a good question. And I always appreciate you bringing in the perspective of, the beloved folks who we've become partners with from, North Dakota area. So thank you.
Byron has his hand raised.
I think there would be less anti-theism in the world, or let's talk about this country, if there was less effort to force all of us through our government, through our politics, to live according to a specific theism. So it's not that I like atheism, it's that it's necessary because of that.
I hear you. So you feel in the context where we live, one has to acknowledge the theistic realities of America.
Yes, Christianity would be fine with me if those who practice it would follow it.
Yep. Yep.
Same for other religions that we don't need to list now.
Yep. Thank you, Byron.
Looking at Roger, are you wanting a comment? You're muted.
Okay. Can you
And
hear
then
me?
Ben Stelmach after that.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, Roger, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, that brings to mind for me this idea about Christian religions controlling things. Their belief that only God can decide when I die and that I can't decide when I die is a really big problem, especially when you look at all of the people that go into dementia and our wonderful scientific medical system can keep their body alive for decades after their personality has died. It's really sad.
Mhm. It really is the tension between sort of the autonomy of individuals and of, communities versus this overlying God-based, set of rules that we have been, subject to in many ways. So thank you, Roger. And then Ben, I think you and then we'll close up and move on.
I think the one thing that I just noticed, sort of contrasting it to the 10 Commandments, is where they are more I shalls rather than I shall nots or thou shall nots. And so that's interesting because I think in some ways it's harder to commit to acting or behaving or doing certain things as it is to avoiding a set of behaviors. And so while I pretty much can get on board with the 10 Commandments, there's nothing that's particularly problematic to me there either. It's less of a call, it's less of a commitment, if you will, than to say I will actually actively behave or participate in a particular way. So anyway, it was interesting.
Great observation, Ben. And I do think, there people question about even Unitarian Universalism about like, if you don't have fear or the potential of, punishment in a later life, why are you motivated to be good? And I think both Unitarian Universalism and humanism take that, and I think as you said, turn it away from fear and instead into a positive way of being in the world. So thank you for that. Well, I really appreciate all your thoughts, and I hope you continue on and maybe take some time later on when we break into breakout rooms. So please join me now in singing hymn 134, Our World is One World. Just like before, we will all be